The old man built. The old man built. The old man built. The old man built. The old man builds is broken in the head. People not seeing reality has put them in the red. Where conscious and spirituality been stricken from the norm and replaced with the ignorance of basic magnetic form. The geometry of God keeps running through his head. That's what makes old man builds broken in the head. The old man builds. The old man builds. Spheres of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to instead. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds.
Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Builds, and in a few minutes I'm going to be joined by Joe and 8 Center. We're going to be talking orgonites today. With that said, let's get into it. So, hold on, can the orgonite get rid of memories that you want gone, or do you have to do something more to get rid of those?
It depends what it is. Sorry, the cord cutting stuff, it's things you probably would have forgotten anyway in mental terms, but your body's still connected to it. There's other things like traumas. They're not just in your memory, they're in your energetic system. They're part of one of the things that's causing some sort of disease. For those things, it can help. But there's other tools as well you probably should be using, like hypnotherapy or QHHT, quantum hypnosis therapy, stuff like that. That's another tool, I suppose, to deal with that. And you've got other things like creative emotional wizardry, which is an advance and a branch of kinesiology. And then you've got other things like myofascial release, which is those same traumas, but I think more to do, they're carried in the muscles and the tissues. So different parts of the body tend to hold different types of traumas and memories. Some of them, the orgonite can work. It's just maybe a little bit slower because you don't know what it is. But one of the ones it's very good for is the money stuff. So it's the sacral chakra and the solar plexus sort of share the role of finances in your manifestations or your life. But the space about 2 or 3 inches above your belly button, like if you're lying down, it's above, so it's sitting out from you. That is where most of your traumas when it comes to money are placed. And it's very good for things like that. But another way of working that is through biofield tuning. So if you're walking around the body, and Reiki people can do this as well, you can feel the tension in the aura as it relates to a body part inside. So with tuning forks, if you run a tuning fork through a problematic place in your aura, it'll feel sticky. And you can do the same thing with a pendulum. You can do the same thing with an orgonite. You can do the same thing with your hands, as long as you're aware of it and sensitive enough to feel it. Once you found a spot, like say this money spot, you put the orgonite there and it sort of doesn't, sometimes it can delete it, but it pushes the old energy out and puts a new one in. And if you remember earlier on, I shared that image with you, the colors, the abstract wallpaper. Mm-hmm. Those colors in wherever it was you needed them were being pushed into the areas that should have been like that to begin with, but there was some kind of traumatic attachment to them, which tends to darken the colors. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So imagine, I don't know, Joe, have you got any clever analogies for that one?
Not so much the darkening of the colors, because I'm not sure I understand that to make an analogy. I understand what you were saying about being able
It's the
to,
vibrance level.
sense the stickiness, so to speak.
Call it the vitality level. If you look at an apple and it's really bright green, it looks healthy.
Oh, you're talking about like vibrance and luminescence.
Yeah.
Okay. Because
So-
as he said earlier, it's a light-based system, right? So your neural synapses, that run all throughout your spinal column, and outward, they fire light, like you said, and it breaks down that white light into different, color spectrums. Now, the intensity of what that, how much of that light and the vibrancy of that light is a differentiating factor. Like, you could be in a situation where you have aligned chakras, but the vibrancy and the depth of illumination just isn't really there either. And those are underdeveloped chakras at that point.
Yeah.
So they could be aligned, but underdeveloped.
And or stuck in traumas.
Or right. Well, then that would hinder the development, so when they're stuck in trauma, it's kind of like a plateau level. Like, they can't get past a certain point because of the attachment.
Yeah.
So, okay.
You were saying there about memories. One of my clients had a problem with money, wasn't able to manifest sort of luxury money. Survival money was there, but nothing extravagant. So just putting the orgonite on the belly button cleared that energy. But it also, in her own mind, it brought back that memory. And it was her father telling her that money doesn't grow on trees. He was planting that seed that changed the way she looked at money for the rest of her life.
Okay.
So the memory after that, it was no longer relevant. It's like cutting the thread of connection through that. It's just gone. In terms of the luminescence, the vitality has been restored to that area. It would no longer feel sticky. It would no longer look dark. So they're all interconnected. And there's so many different ways to look at it, which is why there's so many tools available to heal it. Again, you don't need an orgonite. You can use tuning forks or pendulums.
Okay.
But understanding the connection between the internal energy system and the external manifestation is an important part of understanding not just the orgonites, but how to heal and evolve as a whole.
Okay. I guess my
it?
memory's completely different than all that. Like, there's no scar anymore. There's no pain. There's nothing to it. I see the same thing over and over again, and I don't see it through my eyes. And it's something that
memory.
Yeah, it's a memory that I lived through, and I just see it like describe it to you. I'm on the back patio of my house. I was 11 years old, 12 years old, somewhere around there. And my brother was getting into a car with a bunch of dudes, and I knew they were drunk. And I should have just bashed my coffee cup over their heads, but I didn't. And he died that night. Now, I know where I was standing, but I don't see it through my eyes. I see it through someone else standing probably about 40 feet away looking at the situation.
All right.
And there's, I feel indifferent about, what happened at this point. You know what I mean? Obviously,
Because if you
knowing what happened would bring anger, but it's not something that haunts me like a, you know what I mean? Like a memory that just keeps running in your head that you can't get rid of, that you absolutely hate. It's more of what bothers me is what I'm looking through. Who the hell was eyes where I was looking through? You know what I mean? What's going on there? Why is that in that way? Not
I can give you one possible scenario for that. If you want to hear some theories.
go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things I like to do a lot is follow NDE experiences and ayahuasca experiences and things like that, just so I can understand the broader perspective of how different people create different realities. Now, one of the ones that was a ayahuasca one, or ayahuasca, is this girl. She was physically abused and assaulted in a forest somewhere. And she managed to get away from her attacker. And she found this other girl who led her out back onto the road. And from there, she got rescued. But she had 2 ayahuasca experiences where this memory was a big play, or a big part of it, part of the experience. So the first time she went back to look at herself as the victim, and she could see this other girl, but before she took the ayahuasca, she didn't remember seeing this other girl because it was all blocked in trauma. It was all sort of like the mind tried to block it out. So that was the first step in opening it up. And then the second time she went back, she was the girl helping her escape to the road.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that just in the ayahuasca experience. She used the ayahuasca experience in the future to physically go back in time and help her escape that experience. It was kind of like her astral body, but to her back then, it looked real. It was like fully corporeal hallucination. But it was actually her, from a later time perspective, going back to help her old self. So if you're looking at that experience from 40 feet away, that could be because in 5 years, you go back and look at that experience. But what you're remembering now is the future version of you going back to look at it. You follow?
Yes.
Does that resonate in any way?
Yes.
Is that what happened?
I don't know if that's what happened at all, but I wasn't a young kid looking at it. That's for sure. I always looked at it as paradoxical. You can't change it. You can only
But you
see
can
it.
change it. That's
But
the beauty of this universe. You don't
it
just
would
have the
change.
power to change your future. You
Yeah,
have
but
the power to change your past because the past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. It's only the choice you make in the now.
I just look at it as a choice. I wouldn't be me. I couldn't change it because everything led up to me being me to now. If I wanted to get rid of all that, I would change it.
But you can change it. Cutting these threads that you're carrying now does actually change it. Because the new version of you is a different timeline. It's still a part of your memory, but it's only because your brain is carrying it. You don't have to carry the energy of it anymore. It can become null and void.
Okay.
This boils back down to the same principles as we were talking about with monks and clergymen and things of that nature, where they undergo voluntary isolation, involuntary separation, with large amounts of time alone and everything like that, to avoid having to undergo those traumas, to have to cut to be bound to those ties, right? So they know that these things that we've all experienced, right, like you did, like I did, they're inevitable in regular societal life. And by removing themselves from regular societal life and cutting the ties from around them and living in solitude, then they're basically shielded from those types of experiences, which ultimately keep us in a, even if it doesn't keep us in a state of being down, so to speak, right? They do act as a thread to keep you from the highest levels of ascension, right? Now, what Eighth Sinner is trying to say, and I don't want to really be wrong about what he was trying to say, because there's different perspectives and ways to look at this, okay? But, from my viewpoint at least, it's not like a time machine where you go back, and maybe a timeline jump like he said earlier with that other guy. Maybe something like that is possible. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, right? What I will say is that being able to be more involved through your own vision that you have, right? Being able to tune into that moment could then give you the introspection to be able to cut the tie and realize that there's no more mystery to the situation. There's no more that could have been done in that moment, or that could have had, or anything else. And because you have the privilege of being able to observe that from an outside perspective, it's something that you could cut the tie of and move on from. And once you're able to do that, then it's part of something that happened and a fact of the matter, but not necessarily something that holds you, that's a reoccurring thought that holds you back in your own processes and your own life. So if it's reoccurring, then
I think you guys are understanding something wrong.
Maybe.
It's not trauma.
Mm.
It's a paradox in my mind of why. It's not the trauma, it's not the situation, it's why. That's it.
But that's where, okay, so
it's not the trauma anymore, but at some point it was.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, but...
Right, but the subconscious works funny because, what you perceive, what reaches your conscious mind as not trauma is your logical extrapolation of what your subconscious actually thinks. Okay, so your subconscious might have a whole entire different attachment than what comes to mind for you. And that's the reason that it's an occurring thing. That's what I'm saying. See, the subconscious works on a totally different wavelength than the conscious mind. The conscious mind is, the subconscious mind works like binary zeros and ones and codes, if you want to think about it that way. Whereas the conscious mind is what takes those zeros and ones, decides which ones of them it's going to take, and then tries to put it in some kind of order that it could feasibly understand. When you get something that you could feasibly understand, Okay, but it's also contradictory to something that you also consciously have decided upon already. It creates these types of situations like you're describing, where like consciously you're like, that was a long time ago. It was an unfortunate thing, but this isn't something that's ruling my life right now. But then you have this reoccurrence that's creating a disturbance and a conflict with that. And it's not up to you. It's up to the zeros and ones that it's extrapolating. So that's where the whole balancing and cutting of the ties thing comes in, because it doesn't work on a conscious level. It works on a subconscious level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it works on the quantum level.
It's hard to really get to the bottom of, because it's not in your mind. It's in your inner mind. Yeah.
Try and look at it this way. If you were to drop a leaf into a river and you go further down the river, the leaf can either bend to the left side of a rock or the right side. But in timeline terms, the left path, you need that trauma to happen to you personally, or that experience. Doesn't have to be trauma. It can be any experience. But on the other path, it doesn't have to happen to you, but you have observed it in somebody else. But if you look further down the river, the leaf still ends up in the same place.
Okay.
It doesn't matter which timeline you follow. The evolution is still there.
Okay. So I just. Would it bother you to think that it was your future self watching the events of the past, and that's why you keep seeing it that way? It's not.
It definitely would have bothered me for a while until I worked it out. And I've had a lot of experiences like that, where I've seen something weird or something weird's happened to me. And they stick with me until I figure out why. And I'm the sort of person who will dig into trying to figure out why.
Okay.
Like all those mystery books about...
it's a puzzle. It doesn't go away till you solve the puzzle, right?
Yeah. It's part of the path to get you to a certain level of knowledge. But it doesn't actually matter how you get to that knowledge. You're not the person with that knowledge until you're the person with that knowledge. Because the now moment is the only one that's real. And right now, you're not just connected to that past and possible future version of you. You're also simultaneously connected to 100 other incarnations of you in different lifetimes, in different life periods, on different planets, as different animals. At the biggest scales of life, you're still connected to all of it. Because all of it is this fractal sort of thought process of a giant God brain. But it's all just happening in the moment.
Okay. Interesting.
Your timeline and your experiences are simply where you're placing your awareness in the moment. And it's another way to tap into, it's not quite telepathy, but compassion more. If you take it, it's similar to that thread idea, where you can track someone over a distance because they left a signature in the environment. They left an imprint. You can go back to the White Room or the void or some sort of deep meditation space. And instead of putting your awareness back into your body, you can lift your awareness up towards the God brain consciousness and put it into somebody else's body. Like, if you want to feel what it's like for your dog to get hit by a car because he's in front of you and he's in pain, you can do that by sort of backtracking that consciousness fractal thread and then repositioning your awareness to be inside him.
Okay.
It's a different form of quantum tunneling, but it's mostly used for trying to experience compassion. Did you hear all that when you were out of the room there, Joe? Or
I didn't. My phone died. So it was critical emergency because it just went black.
okay. I was just saying that in the similar way to backtracking threads from the Sacagawea perspective across the imprinted landscape, you can backtrack the consciousness threads towards God consciousness and then put it in a different creature, like your sick dog, for example, so that not just you're not just trying to guess what they're feeling, but you're actually moving your awareness into them. It's just a different type of thread.
Okay, so like from a meditative perspective, if you're in like a state of expanse, and then you cross the bound, more or less, it kind of gives you the opportunity to, have a multi-perspective view, more or less. That would give you a much greater sense of what it is you're tuning into.
Yeah,
gotcha.
It's usually mostly for feeling compassion or teaching people how to feel compassion.
Yeah, one of the big byproducts of all this sort of stuff is, anytime you have a balance in your chakras, regardless of where you are spiritually, and ends up being highly empathetic responses, which is again something that, when you bring that into your normal everyday waking physical reality in life, is something that you need to be able to, integrate healthy. Because what ends up happening is you open yourself up to vampiric type of energy forces, things that'll suck you clean of all your good energy if you allow it to. And that sometimes it could be as simple as walking into a room and sensing that somebody's really, really off. And if you don't know how to sit there and manage that, it's the same law that Thinner was talking about last time. When you have the more powerful, a vibratory force, it overtakes the other one and reaches a form of equilibrium, bringing either one down or one up. Negative emotions or negative vibrational energies, right, could be very, very powerful. So even if you're, in a pretty good mood or whatever, somebody who's in a very bad mood, that's a much more powerful energy, and it'll bring you right back down to it. So healthy integration, critical aspect.
Gotcha. Interesting.
One more thing about that, going back to the backtracking thread stuff, it's one of the things taught in telekinesis as well, where if you're a beginner, a lot of people will try and use their chi to push things over, like to push objects over. But one of the more advanced ways of doing it is to place your awareness inside the object and feel what that object would feel as if it was falling over. And you create the movement of the object that way. That's a much more powerful way of doing it, because you're not trying to exert force, you're using a more powerful compassion energy to change things.
Tuning forks.
Interesting.
But that leads on to the other stuff with the orgonites, which kind of brings it back to full circle. It's not just for the physical stuff. It can help with the spiritual stuff as well, like developing telepathy, increasing your overall energy, so you're better, your telekinesis or hydrokinesis or whatever you're practicing, you're able to focus more on those. And mostly, especially for the astral, dream walking, that kind of thing. It's very good for.
All right, now this is going to probably take the conversation in a little bit different of a direction, but it's something that you had mentioned to me before, and I found that interesting, which is the energy, the chi energy that the orgonite is putting out. Right now, is there a way to make that into usable energy? Something that we had brought up, but interestingly, Mike, he was talking, I remember one day, about his steel box, right? And his steel box is an orgone generator, he called it, right? And follows all the same principles as everything that you've discussed. And what he surmised about it when we discussed it was that it more or less creates the chi energy, which he didn't call chi energy, but chi energy, right? And he says that it kind of looms and billows like a gas. Okay. And the one thing that always eluded him was how to harness that, energy, because it was measurable energy, but it was more in a static form. Like
he couldn't put it to work.
Couldn't put it to work.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, we were talking about that today, and I think there is. One of the researchers in pyramid energies, the guy who built something like 40, 50-foot pyramid or something. I can't remember his name, but it's a pretty famous story, so you'll be able to find it easy enough. The guy, he basically built his house as a pyramid. And I think he got the idea from a dream or something. When he connected, I think it was a soda can to the bottom using a bit of wool. And he walked up his stairs to connect this wool strand tied to the soda can, or it might have been a block of nails or something like that. But he connected it with wool to the top of the pyramid, and he got an electric shock so powerful it flew him 40 feet across the room.
40 feet, man.
That's shock.
Yeah.
Spiritual stuff in 40, man. That's always been the case, huh?
But it can be powerful. But I think one of the keys for that is that was a hollow pyramid. So you're fully inside the black hole when you're messing with all that stuff. Like the Great Pyramids, there's cavities inside that magnify this energy. So I think there's definitely a way of doing it from the inside. What I'm trying to do is figure out how to do it from the outside. So you have the orgone generator accumulator. In my case, it's probably a pyramid. And you push that sort of like a radiant energy, the way Tesla would have done, into a workable form.
Okay, so just backtracking a little bit on some of the things that you're saying, and then trying to put it into something that we know could possibly work, right? If it's accumulating energy,
yeah,
and then making it into some form of purified, coherent energy that then is basically projected out of the top by virtue of the quartz, right? That's sort of what we've discussed. And the pyramid structure also lends itself to that. But its output is ultimately longitudinal waves, right? It's scalar in nature, right? Well, the way to collapse scalar is to, basically throw other scalar at it, from a second source, of the same native frequency base. So technically, if you had two tuned pyramids that are output the same types of native frequencies that are being neutralized, so to speak, and then put out into a scalar propagation, if you could get another scalar propagation to meet that, then there should be a waveform collapse that occurs at the point of interaction.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
So if you have two pyramids and they're upside down, pointed at each other, then technically there should, provided there's enough energy going through them, there should be a collapse event that occurs. Should be.
Yeah. You probably couldn't use crystals in that, though, because the crystals would have different frequencies. You'd have to just build a simple layered system with as close to equal frequencies inside it, like just using quartz and just using one, maybe two base metals or something. So there's as few variables in the frequency department as possible.
Didn't they have a healing platform in Egypt?
What?
Like a healing room, a healing platform, where they took care of this kind of stuff. Well, I got a very specific one in mind. It would be like you built the floor of it as an orgonite, and it was just layered on top of each other, where you could pick up the energy from the pyramid that goes into it.
Yeah, and then there's a granite block in the middle of the room that you'd lay on top of in the center of the in the energy center of the room.
And you mean where the sarcophagus is?
Well, it's not a sarcophagus.
I'm not talking inside the pyramid at all.
No,
But something similar.
Outside. Maybe it's just me.
Sorry if I'm missing. I thought I followed your train of thought on that one, but I guess not.
No, just something I heard once. It's very interesting that, like, they take care of the people from Egypt to build the pyramid by rapidly healing injuries using the energy. So, and because of the way it builds out and the way that it works, and that's all I'll say about it, it would do that.
Yeah. Well, they had them all over, but maybe that one example stuck in your head because it's like that puzzle piece. You're still trying to work out why it's working like that.
Yeah.
But the whole entire Earth is built out like this, which is the incredible part.
Yeah, but it's got to be focused.
It's got to be focused, right? It's too diffuse. It's also too interrupted at this point, too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's possible to do a wave collapse if you can get the frequencies matching closely enough. But that's going to be tricky.
Well, now some people do make active orgonite where you could throw frequency through the coil.
Yes.
In them, right? So some people even have they have active Ronin coils that you could throw a frequency through, and then it also still has that S bifilar in a pyramid shape, for instance, or a coaster shape or whatever it is. So
but the orgonite's still acting as a separate carrier wave for that.
It is, though there would be some differentiation, but
yeah. Well, the other way I was thinking today is using aluminium. So you can't use aluminium inside an orgonite because it changes the phase angle of the energy. But if you've got some sort of capacitor system wrapped around that aluminium, you're going to take that scalar wave, change the phase angle, and then use that to build up the energy between two different plates. Like maybe an electrode on one side and then something else on the other.
Sounds familiar.
You're building light.
build it like a capacitor.
Yeah, you're building light. Aluminum is a real funny metal when it comes to that. When you make capacitors out of it, they're
Yeah.
very good for
See-
building light.
What they do, from my understanding, is most things carry their energy along their long axis. So if you've got a copper pipe, you put energy in one side, it's going to come out the other side. But in aluminium, in scalar terms, the energy is going to come out every couple of inches along the pipe. It's going to come out more strongly perpendicular on the short axis instead of the long axis.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the keys to the Kozyrev mirror, if you've heard of that one.
Yep.
Because all that energy, it follows that tunnel inside the spiral that he built, like a capacitor, because the energy was coming out of the face of the plate instead of following the actual spiral itself. So if you put that in a phi ratio spiral, it should also condense and amplify that energy all into one spot in the middle of the room.
That's
I
true.
think that's how he worked that.
Well, the eddy current would push the energy out of it. It doesn't allow it to stay inside the metal.
Mhm.
It stays on the surface of the metal. That's why aluminum is special. It's not like copper. Copper sucks it in. Iron sucks it in. Aluminum won't allow it to stay in there. It doesn't
Yeah,
like scalar energy that way. It stays on the surface.
That's also another reason why low impedance, audio wires and stuff like that nowadays are almost always aluminum core copper plated, is to keep the waveforms going through it in its purest form, is to keep it off the center. The video that you made earlier today, I mean, that was one of the best ways that I've ever heard the what do you call it, the imaginative, and because it actually accurately described what I always try to explain, that obviously it failed to do because it's so difficult, but the pushing of force of the waveform along a wire, the pushing force, it has nothing to do with electricity and a wire. Like, that's the problem. It has to do with the flow waveform movement of the molecular structure of the actual material itself, that's actually moving energy along the outside. It's sort of like an auger in a way, like how an auger will drag something from here and up above and then move it along, right? That's what it's doing, and seeing the waves. So the reason that I'm saying that is because that's most evident when you're dealing with something aluminum core, as opposed to solid copper, because it keeps the waveforms helical and outside, rather than having to move in and out of material.
I don't know what you just said there, but something in my mind just triggered from it. If you have two aluminium plates above one orgonite, you might also be able to create a wave collapse between those two plates.
Yeah, we kind of touched on that last time a little bit.
Are you trying to temporarily collapse the wave, or are you trying to completely collapse it for good?
Completely collapse it and then collect it the way you would with the coil going through the Tesla coil, or the wire going through the Tesla coil. Collapse it into the middle. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
I don't know that you want to collect this energy in that same way. Like, it'd be very easy if you built the huts and then you put the roof on it and you want to collect energy that way as an orgonite. That would be easy.
Yeah, it's still scalar though. The idea for this is to turn the scalar into workable, usable electricity.
No, I understand that, and that's you're building a lens effect on the top, the way that the roof goes all the way around, and with each layer, you'd be picking up energy. So you very well have obviously thermal energy in there, that's for sure. But if you just wanted straight volts and amps out of it or something like that, you could get that. But that's not the energy you want to attract into it. You're looking for like a spatial energy. It's different.
Right, radiant energy.
Yeah, I don't want to say this. Radiant energy is, God, it's a pain to even try to explain. It's like a gas cloud, and you're pulling it into something. You're not forcing it in. You're not driving it in. It's pulling in. It's a little bit of a different thing. I keep saying that you have to pull it through the light bulb. You have to make a draw to pull it in, and that's what the orgonite does on those roof things. Is what in my mind is it's making the draw to pull in the vortex. That's what you're looking at. So it's usable energy. It's just not for the same purposes that we would use it for AC and DC. Like,
but you can still convert that to hot energy afterwards, if you wanted to, right?
You can convert it if you wanted to. It's not the type of energy I would ever want to convert. I don't know if that makes any sense to you at all. It's just not that there's so much easier of a way to do things than to convert that.
Right, like what you're saying is the density levels really aren't there, and I would suppose, and there's too much of a process involved with, I guess.
Look, there's a massive amount of power in negative energy. There absolutely is. It's just, it builds different. I said in the video earlier, we're not creating or destroying the energy. We're simply creating a draw to pull in the vortex.
Mm-hmm.
And you're specifically looking for certain vortexes. If you want an energy vortex, build a coil. That's it. I can get your plasma out of it, no problem. I can get you energy out of it. I can make it sink to another coil, pull you more energy out of it all day long, right? This energy,
electricity to start that process.
Oh, I don't. I can use scalar energy. I can use radiant energy, which I believe are the same thing. I don't even need volts and amps to start it. I could just use frequency on its own.
But how do you provide that frequency?
Well, you can use
sing to it.
If I make a tuning fork, I can put it right next to it. As long as it has the same frequency, it'll turn on. If I know that something's vibrating in a cavern, it'll turn it on. I just need the frequency. That's it. Once I get a frequency and resonance, it's over. That coil's started. And it'll produce energy all day long.
Yeah, and I mean, you've shown that with you had all the secondaries just hanging around, and no primary on it whatsoever, and it was just able to fall into resonance once the saturation levels were correct enough, and once they start ringing, and they start ringing louder and louder until you stop the source of emission.
You were still using a frequency generator to start that process. You weren't using tuning forks.
I could, though.
I'd like to see that if you can.
Yeah, well, I can. Cool. I just have to put the actual wire winding to the same thing. And I'll say this. I could show you a video that would be turning on a tuning fork, and you get the actual transformer to produce energy. And it 100% works. All you need is that resonance of the two forks, one to the other. And as long as the winding is the exact same of it, it'll turn on.
Right. But what I'm saying I would like to do is be able to create an orgonite that can do electric work.
Okay.
So how do you tune the frequency of the scalar once you have it? If you don't know the frequency.
If you wanted to do the work, then put the coil inside of it, and just before you put it inside, just see what the frequency is of it.
I mean, obviously, there's things that you could do to try to minimize the variables. So, measuring out everything you do by weight.
I just take your design you had, your how do I say it? What do you call that? The orgonite design that's a wire?
The bipolar?
There you go. All you gotta do is find the frequency of that, and you could do it. That's it. That's all you need.
You can do it. You should be able to do that with a rodent coil as well. Then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, I think people don't understand frequency properly, and if you did, then you could turn on anything with frequency. It just matters. We can't always get to that frequency with what we build because we're not building them correctly. That's part of the problem. Like, I could take a DC flyback and change the frequency of it just like that. I take a trigger circuit.
That's the part I never thought of before. Measuring the frequency of, like, say, a rodent coil before you put it in the resin.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about doing it that way.
Yeah.
That might work, yeah.
There you go. And then you can attenuate the frequency and you can actually do whatever you want with it.
Have a lot more control over, what types of energy are being put out too.
Yeah.
Because, remember with scalar, like even if it's working with your own frequencies, right? Like you said, your body only takes what it needs. Well, that's because the scalar waveforms of certain native frequencies will only collapse when it's in a certain range of tune with other frequency, right? So it'll only actually affect what it's in tune with, which is why, like you said, a lot of the critical aspects are, variations of different crystals and so on to influence that. So, and that makes total scientific sense as to why it would aim certain chakras and affect those and none others. Because all that stuff is tuned to certain frequencies.
You just have to add the carrier wave for electricity as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, if you just have the coil in there, then you can start a Tesla coil next to it as long as it matches the frequency of the coil inside the orgonite, and the orgonite will turn on and do whatever you want.
Would that be the primary or the secondary, though?
All you have to have is a secondary inside that orgonite. That's it.
I thought the whole purpose of the secondary was to wrap around the primary. No?
Well, you have the primary and the secondary goes inside of it in a Tesla coil, right? But a Tesla coil is only two frequencies. It's the frequency of the secondary and the frequency of the primary to match it, so you put them in resonance. That's all it is. And once you've done that, then any coil next to it that matches that frequency turns on. And it can become a real problem if you have that thing tuned in well enough, because you'll be overwhelmed with energy in the room right away. Like, put it this way, I have 5 receiving coils, I should say, and I have one driving coil. And when you get it to the resonance frequency, you could be off by 20 kilohertz, and it's still going to resonate. But the closer I get it to the exact same frequency, the more energy it produces, the more plasma that comes out of them. Because I drew the vortex into every single one of them, and I didn't even have to have it close. It could be 5 feet away, and I'll still turn that sucker on with plasma, and draw the vortex in both sides. It becomes a bipolar Tesla coil at that point with the null zone in the center immediately. So it's a 3D version of the flat version that you use. It just turns like this now.
See, so the interesting thing about them building that type of capacitance is that once they reach a certain point, you could even move them further out because it's no longer dependent solely on the source of emission that it originally started resonating from. It could now actually exchange its own resonance that's a higher power with everything else in the system at a greater distance. So you can start it up close and then you could pull it apart because, you know, they still work in conjunction with one another once they reach certain levels. The crazy thing is they'll continue to build capacitance at those greater distances, allowing you to then pull it further out some more.
You know,
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you should be able to tap that energy along the cable and then put whatever gadget or device you're trying to power inside some sort of Faraday cage, but connected to this external cable that's pulling that resonance in. So you wouldn't get the field complications around the object you're trying to use.
that's correct.
Right.
But don't ever build the coils in a circle around the original one.
Don't ever do it.
Don't ever do it.
Sorry, build around what?
Let's put it this way. If you wanted to put your Tesla coil in the center of the room, a prime mover, and you had 5 Tesla coils and you laid them out in a pattern of a grid of 5, right? So you don't want to turn that on. You're okay keeping them in front of you, keeping them all over here. You do not want them around you. That's just a bad idea. You're starting to put geometry into energy at that point, and that's not what you want to do.
There's certain analogs that I've drawn for that. It's certainly not something you want to do, because if you light 5 candles and you put them in a hexagon shape, and then you stand in the middle,
Yeah.
You know, there's certain things that are practiced.
Yeah, you know,
Just saying.
I don't know that you want that energy in you. You don't want to be standing in the middle, at least.
Well, as long as you retain the power to shut that field down, it's pretty safe.
Well, it's
when you can't shut it down, it becomes problematic.
That's the problem. You're looping it. You're now creating the causality loop, because one turns on one, which turns on the next one, which turns on the next one, which is causality that continues to turn them on.
All you have to do to turn that off is move one of them out of the geometry.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
you got to break the pattern.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's not a good idea. I didn't say you couldn't do it.
There's certain cascading effects that happen with, you know, when you have things working in geometry, sequence, and resonance. Whenever you have all of those things, that creates flow, right?
Yeah.
Those 3 factors create flow. When you have micro flows playing into a macro flow, you end up with an amplified effect, right? That's just common sense.
Everything, the frequency drops to the frequency of the correct frequency for each coil. So you start to get a runaway.
Cascade. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. I never thought you'd want to put any energy in your orgonite at all. I thought they were simply to pull in the fields of energy from the earth.
Well, I still enjoy the concepts of free energy. And if you can build an orgonite that powers your computer or powers your house in a safe way, that's worth pursuing.
So that can be done but it's not done through the lens of an orgonite, right? It's done more through the lens of a layered cell, which, is a lot of what's going on just generally. All the types of batteries and stuff that are in use are layered.
There's a lot of ways to do it, but it's only because I'm obsessed with orgonites that I want to do it this way.
Right. Oh, reasonable. Listen, that's reasonable enough.
Create a multi-layered pig cell as an orgonite. Create a multi-layered pig cell as an orgonite, and it'll produce energy all day long. Listen,
when you said it before, one of the things that came to mind, other than the butt plug, was was like, what if you had like shoe insoles, like little, like literally just like thin wafer type layered orgonite that you could just put in the bottom of your shoe, and that way you always have it coming upward onto you. Well, like something like that.
There is actually a picture going around the internet that looks like something like that was done in the past, but I think it's fake.
So it couldn't be like the 70s platform heels where they had the fish in it, but instead you make an orgonite in it.
Yeah, this was some kind of moccasin with like copper coils and stuff in it. It's just, it looks ridiculous. It looks like it's made to look old, kind of thing. But if you're walking around on bare soil without shoes on, without socks on, you're getting that energy anyway. It's just without the programming. The shoes are kind of pointless.
The fact is, societally, generally, that's not the norm, right? Yeah. So whenever you look for the way to integrate it into, people would rather buy something or make something that they could make that one time, and then it's there, and then it's in effect, and they don't have to change anything about what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
People love that. That's convenience.
Especially when you're walking on concrete every day. I can see the benefit for it, but I'd rather just live out in the countryside and walk barefoot.
That's fair.
Yeah. Sounds like my brother. Walked everywhere barefoot.
Yeah.
I know people that still do.
Yeah. Well, he probably still does, I'll tell you that. Yeah. Interesting. That's why you told me earlier when we were on the chakra thing that to go out there and stand on the clay.
Yeah. That's more to discharge and ground you, just like as a daily sort of check-in. Yeah.
Actually, but as we know, that energy works both ways. So it would depend on what you need, where you're at, right? So if you need to ground yourself and discharge, fine. But if you're in need of that energy, it could give it back too.
Yeah.
I don't see why it couldn't.
No, I was suggesting this to Nathan because, like me, his head tends to run away with him. So one way to bring that back to a sort of calmer state on a regular basis is to touch base with the earth once a day, or even twice a day. It helps balance things out better. Just there's no point. You don't need to do 20 minutes of meditation just to ground yourself. It only takes a minute. So
it's true. And you had mentioned burying the or replacing the organites on or in the ground every so often, just as like a maintenance ritual. I mean, that's something that they say about most crystals as well.
Yeah.
There's just certain
it's the only method I recommend
that they have to undergo. Some of them actually work off of moonlight or sunlight. Others are just more affected by like ground. I have a piece of malachite here, right? It's a beautiful.
Malachite's a dangerous one.
Right. Well, here's a huge, beautiful piece of malachite.
Nice.
Right. Now
I can feel that in my head.
So right. So here's the thing about malachite.
Ooh, that's strong.
Yeah, man. Malachite is it'll give and take energy sort of like an orgonite, okay? But it stores it all. So anything it takes, like all the bad and all that, it stores. And
do you remember I was talking about the film canister orgonite I made?
Yeah.
The tiny one.
Mhm.
When I was doing that, when I was the first 3 or 4 months experimenting with how to make them better, I was using my boss stroke friend in the charity shop as a guinea pig. And we got into this routine of me saying, stick your hand over that and see what happens. Only this one time I put malachite on it, and she forgot to remember to take her hand away from it once she felt something. Because the first few times she didn't feel anything, they didn't work. I was still trying to learn it. But one of the things about malachite, it transmutes the metaphysical into physical. So she kept her hand over this thing for like 10 minutes, and she was sick for 3 days straight after it. All of her repressed emotions turned into this sort of brown-black vial in her guts, and she was just throwing this up for like days. It's a very powerful crystal.
Very
not
powerful.
to be underestimated whatsoever.
That's why that one actually gets discharged on a periodic basis. And if I have like a bad day and I use it, it has to go and be neutralized before it comes back in.
Yeah,
That's
it's the
just how
same
it
as
is.
tourmaline. You want to do that with as well. Or what's the other black one? Not tektite. Not tekite. Oh, there's another black one like tourmaline. It's very powerful, but you have to clean it on a regular basis. There's
Yeah.
a few of them like that.
Like jet.
Onyx, that's the one.
Oh, onyx. Yeah. Onyx.
That holds an energy really badly.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about malachite too, though, is that if you are balanced just generally, and you have like positive things going on, it holds on to that too, and it'll give it back to you. So, you know, like that whole cleansing routine and stuff is really mostly necessary when you're using it to balance or kind of overcome things that are hard or negative. But if you're in a good way, it could actually just keep you in a good way too.
Yeah, you have to have a certain level of experience before you can kind of get to that point, though.
Yeah.
When I first started messing with the orgonites, one of the ones that really hit me was sodalite. I don't know if you know that one. It's like a blue.
Yeah, it's like lapis, except without the gold.
Yeah.
Well, not that it's real gold and lapis, but the gold color.
Yeah. So that one there, it when I put my hand over it, it made me want to dance, and it was such a powerful experience. And I only had maybe 10 or 15 crystals at the time, and the one crystal I did have in my collection I didn't want to touch was malachite. Once I knew this stuff had power, I was terrified of touching the malachite because I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, well, I was drawn to it, so obviously I needed it. How it went.
But it wasn't your first day on the job either.
It's not my first day on the job, no. And I bought that. I didn't find it. There's no malachite by me. So
interesting.
Well, it looks quite polished as well. It's quite nice.
Well, yeah, it's botryoidal by nature, and you can actually see the botryoidal formations in it. But they did polish the top up of that. You could actually see the botryoids polished up.
That's a nice one.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one, and it's in a good way too. But interestingly enough, this is basically 80 to 90% pure copper. You know, and then there's just you know, like different carbon minerals in there that mix with the pure copper, and then it crystallizes that way. And usually it crystallizes in what they call botryoidal configuration, which is like bulbs. So it has like little balls that it forms in,
Got
like with
balls.
like lumps all over it. Yeah. And it's only found in a couple places in the world. Arizona is one of them. I know that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Actually brings up something else I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
There's a parallel with crystal atomic structures and medical practices. And one of the most obvious is not copper, but lithium. The crystals with high amounts of lithium in them are very good as a replacement for people who need lithium in their medications for heart problems. So it just exemplifies there are parallels and bridges between the academic pharmaceutical understandings and this sort of more metaphysical understandings. The connection there is always going to come down to the atomics and what's in stuff, the resonance, the natural resonance that they're oscillating at. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that briefly.
Interesting.
Yeah. What that reminds me of is how we had talked about, you know, on other subjects, how if you were to introduce certain resonance into soil, right, and then that resonance is brought into a fruit-bearing plant, how the fruit that comes off of that plant is actually in resonance with where you put the soil, and that if those certain frequencies are beneficial frequencies, then the fruit is much more inclined to also carry the benefits of those frequencies.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then if you tie that together with the idea that, well, what you said the other day about how, you know, every ailment, so to speak, that you could possibly undergo is, you know, a misalignment, so to speak, in your resonance for that certain part, and that the effect of different medical treatments is to bring that back to its, you know, its healthy resonant frequency, right? Whether it be, you know, an herbal treatment or you know, an over-the-counter treatment. I'm trying to keep this as straight as possible, right? You know, or some type of holistic approach, right? It's all to bring that back to resonance through whatever resonance they're bringing into it. That's what you had said, Center, right?
Yeah.
So it all kind of starts to tie together and imparts the question that if there's these frequencies that these treatments, so to speak, have, right? Can that frequency be imparted into something more natural, like for, say, an apple or an orange, be consumed and then have a similar effect?
Well, I can tell you another way of transferring frequencies like that in food specifically is when I didn't have the fridge and I was using it to clean foods, I'd often have just a pile of all my foods stacked up on top of each other. And one thing I noticed, when I put chili peppers underneath normal peppers, the heat of the chilies would actually push itself into the peppers. So if you wanted to...
Now I want to try that. That's cool.
It'll probably work with your scalar generator that you made.
Yeah.
So if you put chilies on that and you want to push the heat into a normal bell pepper...
That's like organic transmutation.
Well,
I think it only works because they're the same family, though.
That's fair.
Hold on. You take they have a machine, the slapper or something like that. It basically is a Tesla coil with the rod down the center. It goes into the water and restructures the water. And once it does that, you could place that water next to a glass of orange juice. And that water will take on the flavor of the orange juice, even though
Not the
they
other way
haven't
around.
been mixed. Huh?
Not the other way around.
Well, you're not going to put the flavor into the orange juice, no water into the orange juice. You're taking the orange juice flavor out, putting it into the water.
No,
So,
you could still have structured water that would improve the flavor of the orange juice.
oh, you could? Yeah, I don't think anybody's tested for that. They just tasted the orange
Yeah.
in the water. So, yeah, it's a scalar energy. So it works in that same area just like that. It's the same thing. It still has it in there. It's built into the water at that point.
That's
Cool.
so banging. That would make the most awesome gimmick drink ever. Like ever.
Yeah.
It's like, right? It's flavored water that's got nothing other than water in it.
Yeah.
Right? How do they make it taste like orange? Magic.
Well,
It's kind of like homeopathy. You dilute something down so much, it's no longer there physically, but it's still carrying the energy of it.
Yeah.
And another one, have you seen the experiments when they're connecting electrodes to plants? They'll take plants in one group that are commercially poorly treated, and then they'll take a healthy plant of the same type, but it's from an organic, nurtured background. When they put the electrodes to it, the organic one sings, but the commercially treated bad ones, they don't sing. There's nothing in them. But when you put the healthy plant beside them, it's like it teaches the others how to sing.
Hmm.
It's the same
Interesting.
thing.
Yeah, well, we've seen that with the mushrooms.
How is it with the mushrooms? I've not seen that, actually, I don't think.
Yeah, the mushrooms talk like aliens.
Oh, with the electrodes on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that video. I
Uh-huh.
didn't believe it until I saw it. Yeah. So I guess you guys didn't pick up on it. If you didn't have orange juice sitting there and you had a bottle of wine sitting there, guess what happened?
Uh-huh.
Maybe you should really think about that. See what's really going on here.
Yeah, right? No, right. Do you catch a buzz though? That's the question.
I don't
Because if
think
you
it
could have
matters.
alcohol that tastes like it and catches a buzz.
I'd be more interested to see if it colored or if it was just tasting like it.
Yeah.
Well, one of my friends who practices the creative emotional wizardry stuff, she used to do homeopathy, but instead of buying the stuff that's quite expensive these days, she doesn't do that anymore. She trains the water or programs the water just by writing the words on it. And there's a process, I think it's called succussion, they call it. It's basically percussion, but when you write the words of whatever homeopathic remedy you want to put into the water, you tap the glass with your nail like 10 times, and it's the resonance that amplifies that energy as well. So she can treat people with homeopathic cures, but she's just using pure water. There's nothing been added to it at all.
Okay, hold on. You said this a couple times. How does the words themselves influence something?
Because they're loaded. Everything that exists has a frequency, including words.
Okay.
And when it comes to the more spiritual mechanic side of things, words or thoughts are electric, emotions are magnetic. So depending on the word, the resonance is going to have more of an electric potential or a magnetic potential. But there's certain words that are just stronger, like love, gratitude, abundance, and things like that. They have both thought processes and emotional processes attached to them. But it doesn't matter what language it is, everybody's talking about the same thing, and that's the basis of telepathy. It doesn't matter what planet you're from. An apple is always going to be an apple. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's like that Shakespeare's poem about roses being any other name. It doesn't matter what name you give it. It's the energy attached to it. And the rose itself, or the apple itself, as a collective energy, is going to recognize that word, even if it's in a different language on a different planet. It's part of a collective of energies that just knows what an apple is, even though the perspective on it is different. For a worm, it can be a home. For a tree, it's the fruit. For us, it's food. For insects, it's food.
Okay.
But it's still an apple.
The idea behind it generally is the same as intention, right? So when I had asked Eighth Center the other day, when you're making your organites, does your mood and your intention in making them, play a role in kind of what you get at the end? And the answer was, well, absolutely. And that's anything in life, right? Like the intention is like often the strongest part of anything. If you go into something with good intent, it's more likely going to pan out than not, most of the time. It's the same thing with that type of transaction. And the good intent is the same as it has its own associated frequencies with it. And language is exactly the same. And they say words are alive, and it does transcend different languages, because it's not just the words themselves, but rather what they mean. Because in esotericism, generally speaking, like communication is nonverbal and it is symbol. Okay, so when you say something and you mean it in a certain way or reference to a certain thing, that's the dynamic that makes the attachment of the word and what you mean. You could actually say rock and mean apple, but if you're thinking apple and write rock, it still knows you mean apple, because that's your intention. You see what I mean?
Okay.
So the word doesn't matter. The word itself, either verbally or written down, okay, is just the symbol being used to represent the intention of what you meant. Okay. So that's why when you make these affirmations to things, or you're programming water, or it always knows the difference. It always knows the difference. If there's, anger or hate or violence, right? You know that the water is now structured in such a way that it's affected negatively. It no longer has the same memory or crystal attributes that it would under better, higher frequency conditions. And it all has to do with the intention, more what you believe and what you want it to be or portray to it, as opposed to what it actually is that you're saying. So when you're in meditation and stuff, you may be using words and so on to try and gather your thoughts sometimes, right? But ultimately, when you're projecting it into whatever it is, it's nonverbal. It's just the idea.
Okay.
Can I jump in and add two things there?
Sure.
Okay, so don't think about it as the words. Think about it as your aura that's being created by the electromagnetic generator that is your heart. It's carrying those two signals. So it doesn't matter what words you use, the energy is in your field.
That
And the
makes
second
more
thing,
sense.
does that make more sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The second thing is, if you want to learn to talk to birds, you can do that the same way. You can whistle any tune you want, but if you add intentions to that whistle, like words, you will actually be able to talk to birds, and you'll understand them because they do the same back to you.
Mm.
They're carrying the energy, and your body knows how to interpret it, and their body knows how to interpret your energies.
Right. It's a form of intuition at that point.
Yeah,
It
it's
is what
kind of
that is.
practice telepathy.
Yeah. And having that intent from your heart, that magnetic field, that symbolic transaction, so to speak, of communication. Realistically, the word in English for this would be imminence. You know, your imminence. That's what you're emitting, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good topic for part 3. If you want, I can teach you how to draw a functioning orgonite using these principles.
That's what I think what we need.
Yeah.
My wife
We
always
discussed
tells
that
me that
before.
I emanate certain frequencies or something that makes her think she can read my mind.
I emanate certain frequencies too. It comes right from my root chakra, and it's rather low frequency. Sometimes it rattles the bed at night and wakes my dog up.
Thanks for that image.
No problem.
How is the dog, by the way?
He's sleeping. He's snoring on my couch, emitting his own low frequency buzz at the moment. See, but what's incredible is that it's also a power making machine with all that low frequency buzz. Because if I hold a lighter up, it singe all the hair off my butt.
I think that's a good place to stop.
The last time I did that, I was in the back of my friend's car when I was like 18, and I almost lit my jeans on fire. And me and my friend, we laughed so hard that I got sick, and I never did it again. Yes.
Great.
That's always fun.
I'm
Glad
glad
it didn't
you
kick back into the pipe.